Hey guys, Liana here. It's Tatas Tuesday, and on May 10th, this series of articles appeared on a Daily Dot website called the Kernel. The history of this website is quite interesting as an aside if you want to look it up, but they have this, under the bridge, the troll issue, which I find quite interesting right off the bat, that the Kernel is deciding to talk about trolls against women. When you look at their subscription, banner, and you've got Miley Cyrus front and center in a not very flattering pose. Dig me in, cat. But, if you look at the Daily Dot's own little ad here, and you look through, there's precisely one woman in the whole image, and she's doing something, vaguely pornographic and unflattering once you punch up the covers and do the Warholian thing they did. So I am kind of amused that they would get a whole bunch of women writing about trolling and run that ad during it. There's a lot of sort of subtle stuff going on. Some would call them written or graphical microaggressions. But I don't like getting in that technical when I deal with feminist stuff. I feel like my role is to discuss this stuff in populist language using words that people understand, that I don't have to spend a whole lot of time defining. And yes, that does lead to some, how do I put it? Some people misunderstand, some people say it's not academic enough, but my job isn't to prepare a master's thesis here. My job is to try to provide information to people in a vehicle where they can understand it. And this issue of internet trolling and internet trolling against women it's a far trickier topic than writing like this gives it credit for. Because what we don't, there's two main things you have to consider when you look at something like trolling. One is the amount of trolling people get, and the term trolling has, let me finish my thought about the two types, and then I'll get on to the definition of trolling. So there's, how much trolling people get, the quantitative element of trolling, which is who gets more, nasty things said about them online, men or women. And it turns out that men actually get more nastiness flung at them on the internets on a regular basis, except for, there are some exceptions. Female journalists are one of those exceptions that do take more abuse than their male counterparts. No one knows why yet. We just know it's so, according to various analytics that have been done on it, that female journalists are one of these exceptions. And I think that's important when we talk about, feminist writers talking about trolling. They do have a point in that. I guess I should include me in that, but you'll understand why I'm distancing myself from this in a minute. And I'm distancing myself by diving through it. Like I'm diving deep down into this issue, past all the chop, and into sort of the, the calm waters at the bottom of the sea kind of thing. Yes, I am the Little Mermaid. Do 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 do. Okay, you don't need to hear me sing off key. But then there's the type or the qualitative analysis of the online stuff that people get sent. And obviously, the stuff sent at men and sent at women is of a different quality, because trolls aim to try to find the line of attack that's going to hurt the most, that's going to get the biggest explosion and, cause maximum lulls, right? So they tend to play the averages and attack men's, toughness or, masculinity, so to speak. And with women, they tend to, attack appearance or likability or something like that, basically attacking a woman's femininity. They're using gender against men and women in the same way, but it looks different. And that's why I think that the solution to this trolling problem, as people call it, is not going to come from a solution that is seen as a woman's problem or a woman's issue. I think that everybody needs to, look at this problem and look at this problem from a through a lens of equivalency, and not so much try to determine who gets it worse, men or women. I think that's a complete waste of time. We've got to get solutions. We've got to get them fast. And the best way to do that is take a high tide raises all boats perspective on it. And what I was getting at before and decided to stay on point instead of going off on a tangent was that trolling, the way trolling is being used today is not my understanding of the term trolling. I thought trolling was supposed to be, something that people do to just, mess around. It's not really intended to hurt anyone. It's they do poke on people that people believe have, committed some internet transgression. There's always a reason for the target. It's not usually a good reason, but there's a reason. There is a method to the madness. Stuff like death threats and rape threats and any sort of threat, I think, goes beyond trolling. That's just, being abusive. And you can troll without, being abusive. I've done it. I've put stuff up knowing it was going to make people go absolutely crazy. And I'm not talking in articles, I'm talking about just personally. When I get frustrated about the noise, I'll throw up a thing or two just because I know it's going to drive certain people nuts. And, dialogue isn't something they're really interested in, and so I do stuff to make myself feel better. Is it the right thing to do? No. Is it actually going to cause anybody to be afraid for their personal safety? No. I'm doing it to be irritating. That's what I consider trolling. These death threats and things like that, I don't think that belongs in the definition of trolling, but that's how they're using it. So for the purposes of this discussion, we will use this Kernel issue's definition of trolling, which is any sort of, attempt to stifle someone's freedom of expression. And I chose that phrase very carefully because people use the word censorship, whether it is or is not censorship, and that gets hung up very quickly. Censorship is a very sensitive term. It's very, it's a hot button issue for a lot of people. So I prefer to use the phrase stifling someone's freedom of expression, because then you don't get into what is the definition of censorship. Is it government censorship? Is corporate censorship a thing? You ask someone in business and they'll tell you, no, censorship is only about the government censoring speech of people. But, you talk to somebody like Noam Chomsky and they'll say that the biggest media concern of our age is corporate censorship of, different opinions. And so I think it's undeniable that the definition, the popular usage of the term censorship is evolving, and I'd rather stay away from discussions of censorship completely here, and that's why I use the term, stifling freedom of expression. Some could say that's splitting hairs, some could say that's the same thing, but I think it's a little bit different. I think censorship is, you know, you can wipe out someone's opinion, just, you know, there's nothing there for them, just whoosh, it's gone. Whereas stifling freedom of expression, you actually, is actually more a process, and this happens a lot online, of encouraging a person to self-censor to make all the noise go away. And that's an important distinction, I think, when we're talking about online trolling. Because, I mean, these are only 3 of the articles that appeared on this thing. Let's call trolling what it really is. And, you know, you can see sort of all the articles along the side about trolling. There's a whole issue online about trolling, and look at the image. It's like all these hands and cell phones and keyboards going after a woman, and they had to pick a ginger, didn't they? Anyway, this is the one that seems to be making everybody go crazy right now. Spaghetti is dropping everywhere because it's written by Brianna Wu. And I actually think that this is one of the better articles in this issue, because it's just telling her take on the whole thing. It's not trying to, you know, other articles, you may have seen the first one, I had up the word cis white male or along the bottom. I don't think this does it. I may have missed it when I originally read it and when I was cramming to do this bit. But, you know, this is just Brianna Wu's story, and it's her story from her perspective, and I think she has the right to tell it. I think people have the right to question various elements of it, but I think that she absolutely has the right to tell it, and I think that those questions should be presented in a respectful, kind of calm light. Because I'm sure she's extremely overwhelmed at this point. I think everybody's overwhelmed. I know I am. I keep diving into these issues because I'm getting more and more people just sending me messages saying, please don't stop, you're actually helping. And I don't see the way I'm helping, but if people say it's helping, then, you know, I do it on their behalf. I continue to do this stuff. Because let me tell you, it's not easy. And, you know, the biggest issue is that there's really no financial benefit to doing this sort of analysis, because it is extremely useful. It doesn't fit anywhere. You know, to turn stuff around quickly enough to be relevant to an issue and try to inform people before it gets too big, the production values can't be that great. And, you know, this isn't an academic paper or something like that. I don't want to do academic papers. I don't. I want things to be written and spoken in language that people can read and understand. You know, I want to be able to, and deliver it via things like YouTube that, you know, people can watch and people can do it in the way they want. They can listen to it as a podcast. That's hunky-dory. So let's get into this one. You know, hopefully I've set this up with respect, because I know there are some gamer-gazi people who stalk my YouTube channel to do the insta dislikes and all that stuff, and try to spread their own, you know, butthurt through me, through my profile. And so, just in case those people go running to Brianna and try to start a cat fight, you know, I want to be very clear that I'm using this article because I think it's one of the more fair ones in this issue of the Kernel, in that it's just, you know, there's no assumption of objectivity here. This is her story, and she has the right to tell it. And her story touches on some very interesting things that provoke thoughts for me, and I want to share those thoughts. This is not an attack on Brianna Wu. She made a game. She's doing her thing. I'd like her to be able to go back to making games instead of this being what defines her. and hopefully I'll be able to touch on that a bit more. We're gonna get into some identity stuff as we talk, but let's dive in. It's been a 15-minute preamble. My God, this is what you have to do when you talk about these things. You have to do all these definitions off the top, so when somebody comes at you, you said this, and MRH, and red mems, and anti-feminist, and you have to be able to point to it and go, no, I clarified this point, and I clarified that point. And they still won't listen, but the crowd they draw of another 10 people can then say, no, she did say off the top that she's clarifying this, and it's not an attack, and it's this and that. You have to spend so much time stating your intent because people go out of their way to warp people's words in this thing. And that's not trolling. I think that's actually political operatives trying to make this thing as messy as they possibly can. So it starts off with a lot of emotion, which I think a lot of people are going to criticize. I need to tell you something terrifying. I have been in this place of stalking and stalking using digital communications. I don't talk about details very much. People who were around for the earlier days of Gamergate will know some of the details. Because that person came back out of the woodwork and tried to use Gamergate to get at me again. I don't talk about the worst elements of it in detail because I don't want to give that person any more attention. I do not want to encourage them to go back down that road, because some of the things that Brianna is saying here are absolutely right. That threats on the internet are not taken seriously. The 49 death threats in the last 6 months, we need to take her word on that, and I'm prepared to. I really don't care if it was 49 or 9. That's too many. 9 death threats in 6 months would be too much. 49, and then we get into the question of credible threats, and that's when this whole thing was starting to fall apart. The thing with the dog, how do I go at this? I am very, lines like this, I'm just gonna go into this, and if I take shit, I take shit. There is no way to know that Gamergate sent someone something. The same way because, Gamergate can't even get along with itself, never mind do something coordinated like this. I know people in Gamergate who, would be appalled by this. And the problem is, and this is a syntax thing again, because people use anonymous accounts to do things like send pictures of mutilated puppies and kittens. There's, to say, this account and this account, it would be meaningless names, right? The organization, the thing, the entity that means something to Brianna in this case is Gamergate, right? Her assumption is that these are people acting on behalf of the Gamergate movement. And she could very well be right that these are Gamergate participants. The problem with Gamergate is people take the organized chaos that is Gamergate and try to either make it complete chaos or complete organization, and it's neither. There is an element of organization, but the minute we hit high emotion, periods of high emotion, the whole thing splinters, and there's really no controls on the whole thing. It's not like, say a political party where someone can actually be thrown out. They can have their membership yanked. Gamergate has such loose, fuzzy edges that, there are people in Gamergate who are big fans of mine. There are people in Gamergate who absolutely cannot stand me and commit, defamation, and they've sent super nasty things. Much earlier on, I used to get anti-Semitic stuff sent to me after speaking on podcasts about my background. And, you know, so I can say it does happen, but then people are like, oh, those are trolls. And can I prove they're not? No, because there's no membership list. There's no members in good standing of the pro-Gamergate faction. So, you know, there are some great people whose names I sort of recognize, but people drop in and drop out all the time. So there's really no way to ever know, is this a troll or is this actually somebody from Gamergate completely losing their shit? And, you know, that's why when I get questions on, you know, David Pakman's show or something like that about numeric, like is it 50-50 anti versus pro with harassment, there's no way to know, because there's just too many variables to run any sort of actual, you know, foolproof, you know, analysis on this stuff. The factors are just so messy. So I think that with a statement like this, people will be quick to call her a liar or sensation grabbing or something like that. I don't think so. I think this is what she sincerely believes. And the reason I like this article, as opposed to some of the others who are done from an attempt at a more, you know, pragmatic approach or a more academic approach, and yet the emotion comes through, she's not attempting to be anything but emotional. And we can take that, you know, as it is. Sorry, tea break. The next thing you're going to see is this, I've seen this in Brianna's writings a lot, this Zoe Quinn, Anita Sarkeesian, and her. That these women have become, not just for her, but for a lot of people, the three, you know, holy trinity of the women harassed by Gamergate. And that's when things start to get interesting, but I'm going to hold off on talking about that because I've been going a long time, and I want to clip through this fast. I don't want this video to be too long, and it's already getting too long. She gets into the stuff with Catherine Clark and the FBI. And you can read the screen if you want, but basically there was a threat, and Massachusetts representative, a member of government, has been meeting with the FBI, and, you know, this idea of, you know, the whole question this article brings up is whether the FBI should intervene in, you know, when things are just words before anything happens. Is the role of the FBI crime prevention, or is it crime investigation, right? And that's a tricky one. And, you know, we go on to more Gamergate stuff. I mean, this is her opinion. I don't agree. You know, with my background, I am very uncomfortable with things being labeled a hate group unless violence has actually been committed against people because of, you know, their membership in a particular group. You know, there are specific groups that are protected from discrimination, and no one's been physically hurt by someone in Gamergate, and so my opinion is they don't constitute a hate group, you know, because they're not out in the real world, you know, burning crosses and lynching people. That's a hate group for me, you know. And I've seen very real racism. I've seen anti-Semitism. I've seen anti-gay violence. And, you know, those are really serious things. And I think that when we start throwing words around too much with too low a burden, then the word starts becoming meaningless, and we start giving these truly reprehensible groups that really do want to hurt people or deny people rights I think we actually grant them more power by diluting words like hate group. But that's just my opinion. Vowed that my dead, mutilated corpse would be on the front page of Jezebel. See, that's one of those things that I would see that and go, well, that's disgusting, and this is a pathetic, angry person, but I'm not going to take this seriously because I'm pretty sure that anybody sending me, you know, a death threat is not connected to Jezebel. So that's an empty threat. They can't actually make that happen. And I mean, I'm sure you can see on this screen, this language is disgusting, and I absolutely believe she did see this stuff. It's gross, but this is when we get into that, and I speak from experience as someone who had a person stalking me who was clever enough to never put my name and the threat in the same piece of communication. They would use linking details, so they would say what they'd like to do to a random person with knives in one video, and then reference that video in something else that connected to something else that connected to me. It was, you know, the time it took to weave that net was incredible. But if you happen to draw, you know, a cop that doesn't understand the internet, that's very hard to explain to someone. And, you know, the other problem is with these threats and with this internet stuff is they get people around the target to do their dirty work for them, right? I mean, a big thing with online trolling is that this kind of stuff can only intimidate if the person sees it. And the person cannot look, but then they've got, you know, their friends who mean well, who want the person to stay protected and safe, but they funnel this garbage to the person who doesn't want to see it. And then, you know, the cops can't do anything because it wasn't direct contact. And people, you know, cops have to be aware of protecting the free speech rights of people too. So if somebody's ranting on the internet and, you know, you don't know where the person is, you don't know where they're, you know, from, you don't even know what country they're in, and that's a big problem with harassment because local police are bound by jurisdiction. This is something I got into. I had trouble with because the in-person altercations, when you know I was followed places or there was a face-to-face problem. They happened in 2 different police jurisdictions around the city of Toronto. And that meant that neither police service could establish a pattern for their records because they could only investigate stuff that was in their jurisdiction. It's an astoundingly stupid loophole. And these are the discussions we should be having. How can we empower local police to actually be able to go in and fix these things? Because a lot of the times, that's why cops can't do anything. Right? Their hands are tied. It's not that they don't want to. And, you know, I can relate very much to, you know, we have a situation here where she knows the person who sent it, but it involved a third party, this credible source, which actually muddies the waters from a legal perspective. People are, you know, trying to help, obviously, but the law doesn't work that way. You know, it's an incredibly high burden to take away someone's freedom of expression or take away someone's freedom of movement. And so the law enforcement will slap a protective order down if there has been a prior, like, romantic relationship so fast your head spins. Anything else, it makes it very, very hard to get. When I went and tried to apply for one, there was actually a separate line for domestic situations to file a protection order, restraining order, a peace bond, as it's called. Everybody else went to another line, and I was warned twice that I'll approve the hearing, but it's very unlikely you're going to get it. And I was actually suggested, and I took this advice, that perhaps the best thing to do was to lie low and not potentially give this person, because of the way this person's mind works, you don't want to go and try for a protection order and fail to get one, because that will be seen as a victory, and that will encourage them, and the whole thing will start up and get worse. Because the goal here is to get your life back, right? To get your life back to something functional, not for anybody to end up in jail. You know, that doesn't get anybody the last 8 months back, right? Someone going to jail. And that's the important thing. Are your movements restricted? Are there places you won't go because of these threats or whatever? That's what's really important in the long run. It's getting your freedom back, getting your life back. And someone being in jail is one way to do it, but not the only way to do it. And so I can relate to this, that you went to the cops, you did everything right, and they still don't do anything. The reality is, this is not a Gamergate specific issue. It's the reality of stalking cases. It's a reality of threats. The police don't do anything on the first one. The behavior has to persist and escalate for them to take action. And, so the comment she makes on my hard drive says this case and 5 others like it. And there you go. They're individual cases. Was it a one-time threat and the person then stopped? Well, if that's the case, then no, the police are not going to prosecute them and put them in jail, because it didn't continue. There's no ongoing problem. There's no pattern. And in order to make criminal harassment stick, you need a pattern. And this has been a problem with the discussion of online harassment, that people keep going back to the definition of criminal harassment to define all harassment. And that's not, there's a reason that criminal is attached on the word harassment. These are the very high requirements to take away a person's freedom for their behavior. It doesn't mean that other harassing behaviors aren't harassing because they're not criminal. And I am really tired of telling people that. There's harassment, and then there's criminal harassment. And there's a reason that criminal harassment is not just called harassment. And there are some people you're never going to convince of that. They need rules, they need solid stuff, and, they think that criminal harassment is the only kind of harassment. And that's just not the case. Celebrities get harassed by the paparazzi. Is that necessarily illegal? No, but it's freaking annoying, right? There are lots of other instances where harassment is not criminal. In my case, it was taking photos I did because of my job that happened to be sexy pictures and spreading them around the internet trying to discredit me. That's harassment, but it's not criminal. It is. It's a pattern of unwanted behavior. That's the definition of harassment. And I made it clear I didn't like it and wanted it to stop, and the person kept going, but that's not criminal, right? It's wrong, but it's not criminal. And all this stuff is statistics that I'm sure are all completely factual and, like she said, depressing. And then we get to her, and good for her, she gives, solutions. She wants new laws passed. This is what she wants. This is where I think we should have the debate here. I'm really not sure that new laws are the way to solve this issue, because governments don't have any money as is, and a lot of the times I've been told this by people within law enforcement, a lot of the reason these things aren't prosecuted is that, we already have to spend money on murder investigations and you know, physical abuse investigations, and every investigation costs money. And horrible things said on the internet are just not seen as a large enough problem yet to justify the tax dollars. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that that's where we're at right now. And I am in favor, based on my own experiences, that this is a community problem, not a policing problem. And I'll get to why in a minute. I want to get through this article. The statement that, here's the Gamergate, is the hate group thing. Oh, she mentioned tax dollars as well. Gamergate has grown in a hate group that threatens the stability of a $60 billion a year game industry. They stopped the women of my company, Giant Space Cat, from showing our upcoming game Revolution 60 at PAX East. That, I'm going to have to stop there and call what on this one? At the time, I understood that the employees of Revolution 60 decided for themselves not to go to PAX East. I understand Brianna went herself. So no one was actually prevented from going. And people choose not to go to shows for various reasons. And, you know, people decide not to go to E3 every year, for instance, because it's not worth the money. I didn't go to PAX East this year because I wasn't convinced that it wasn't going to turn into a big three-ring circus, and I wasn't convinced that it would be worth the money to go because I wouldn't be able to cover the things I wanted to get because there would be so much noise. And there was a lot of stuff. The disruption, I believe, is the fight between pro-Gamergate and anti-Gamergate. I don't think it's one side. The turf war is what's being disruptive. But is it actually affecting sales? I haven't seen any evidence for that. And this is very important because of laws that are coming down in my country, Canada, that allows something to be labeled as a terrorist organization if it affects commerce in the country. And that is, I've heard that's an attempt to go after environmentalists by our very anti-environment government right now. But that's Canadian politics, and I'll hold off on talking about that. But, you know, claims that it's threatening the stability of an industry are quite serious based on the laws in some areas, the way the laws are worded. So we have to be very careful. Can we prove that? Can we show that business is actually being destabilized? I don't see that. The people I talk to, everybody's tired. Everybody would like this to go away. It is wearing on people. But more and more people are just moving on and not making this a relevant issue anymore. I have chosen not to. I have chosen to continue to go back to this just because I am concerned about the mental and emotional well-being of some very good people and very, you know, they're gamers. And it helps them to have sort of a sane and sober analysis. It stops them from feeling like the world is against them and that they're being unfairly labeled just because they care about what they perceive to be, you know, dirty dealings in the games press. So that's part of my motivation for staying involved in this, is I just don't want people to fall into despair because they feel like they're not being heard from somebody. And I'm not doing it, you know, I'm doing my articles on other things, but and prepping for E3 and all that stuff. But, you know, on my personal YouTube channel, I can do it, so the reference is there. But, yeah, I have to stop on that statement, because that, and again, this is a very emotionally driven piece. And that's what happens when you get a lot of emotion. You get statements like that kind of don't match up with, and I don't think Brianna's deliberately trying to deceive here. I think she's just so emotional that things are becoming bigger than they actually were. And this is an interesting, I got ahead of myself here with the terrorism tea break. Emotional terrorism. The concept of emotional terrorism. And this is what I was talking about before, about attempting to stifle people's public participation, which is slightly different than censorship. And I think we have to open up this examination here because it's one-sided. She's right that some people do this, but there's another side to the coin. And I'm focusing on the idea being to intimidate, bully, and silence anyone speaking out for diversity in games until they quit. That does happen. That absolutely happens. People try to do it to me. People think I'm some sort of secret SJW, and they won't be convinced otherwise. You can't convince someone that something isn't a secret because they think we can't see it because it's a secret. It's an impossible, it's like, when did you stop beating your wife? There's no good answer. But there is another group who is attempting to intimidate, bully, and silence anyone they believe isn't speaking out enough for diversity in games. And I know this because I get hit by both these types of people. And it's very important to remember that Gamergate did not start these tactics. They did not invent these tactics. These tactics have existed as long as the internet has existed. We're becoming more aware of them. But these have been used prior to this. I mean, I wrote a whole article series about how hard it was to criticize Anita Sarkeesian because you get this massive horde of her supporters who are coming from a place driven by identity and not sense, and they just, it was disheartening and it was depressing, and it made me feel like I wasn't allowed to speak, but I did speak, and I sort of broke through that wall. And so I can say firsthand, and that was going on before Gamergate got going. I think that one of the things that hasn't been discussed enough is whether that was actually one of the causative factors of this whole thing blowing up, that people felt like their speech, they were being silenced when people said, well, okay, I am a straight, white, cisgendered man, but I don't want that to be a bad thing. I want to be able to tell my story too, because I think there's still poignancy in it. And a lot of those people got very shouted down, and you got shouted down for defending them. And that happened. That happened, and that's undeniable. And I think that people should, if somebody's a straight, cisgendered white guy, they should be able to tell their story. And if somebody's, a Latina transgendered lesbian, they should be able to tell their story too. That's the way I would like to see it work. And not be, oh, this is an SJW game because somebody told their own story from the position of somebody who doesn't happen to be a white man. So I think we need, there's a classic example of we need to show both sides of the coin to really affect this issue. So here we go. Prosecuting Gamergate. Oh, good, we're almost done. Prosecuting Gamergate. How do you prosecute Gamergate? You can prosecute individuals within Gamergate who broke the law, but prosecuting Gamergate is getting into racketeering. We require racketeering or terrorism laws to prosecute someone just for membership in Gamergate. And this is why I'm very uncomfortable with guilt by association, no matter who does it. Because Gamergate does not have a stated goal to attack anybody. Gamergate has a stated goal of wanting better ethics in journalism. That's not, terrorism. That's not the equivalent of wanting, the destruction of the state of Israel or running black people out of the U.S. South. This is some people who, prosecuting Gamergate would be prosecuting an ideology akin to prosecuting feminism or prosecuting, say, conservatism or liberalism. And I think that's dangerous because I would like people to stop prosecuting feminism for the actions of some feminists. I would like people to stop prosecuting liberalism for the actions of some liberals. And so I would like people to stop advocating for prosecuting Gamergate because of the actions of a very small minority. Kotaku in action alone is over something like 30,000 strong right now. And that's not factoring in the people who don't go there and only use Twitter or only use, 8chan. And some people talk about Gamergate like it's only 8chan or it was created by 8chan, which wasn't true. 8chan was not Gamergate's hub at that point. It was 4chan and people left. So, in terms of these single point of origin theories, trying to define edges on Gamergate is just not possible. Do some people within Gamergate deserve to be prosecuted? Well, that's something to speak about. But that is them, not Gamergate as a whole. Gamergate is not, the Yakuza. They're not a ninja clan. Although, wouldn't it be cool if they were? Vivian James, the purple and green ninja. I'm down. Okay? It's an ideological movement, and you can't prosecute that. And I'm saying that as somebody who doesn't like what's happening on both sides. Okay? And, okay, let's take her summary, because there's some positives in what she's saying about introducing consequences into the equation for men that treat harassing women like it's a game. In Grand Theft Auto, if you threaten to murder someone, police will pursue you and you'll get busted and you'll lose $100. I don't think that Grand Theft Auto is the best metaphor for this. I think that social consequences are probably more powerful for this sort of thing. Do some men treat harassing women like a game? Absolutely. Do some women treat harassing men like it's a game? Absolutely. Do some men treat harassing other men like a game? Do some women treat harassing other women like a game? Well, anybody who's been to junior high school knows that some women treat harassing other women like it's a game, okay? What Brianna says is true about introducing consequences. I just think it doesn't go far enough because, the people that I have had the greatest ongoing problems with in this whole Gamergate thing have been other women. The nastiest, the worst hit pieces. There's been a couple guys that have been on my ass about things, but far more women decided to personally attack me. And, that I've really struggled with this because people seem unwilling to admit that that is an issue as well. There's comments by me responding to a YouTube comment to someone because I've finally had enough with what I considered harassment. When someone is constantly commenting and downvoting and this and that, trying to tell their own story through my profile, and they will not have a direct conversation where they are willing to listen and take some accountability for their behavior, I consider that harassment, and people have done that. When someone violates a non-disclosure agreement to defame and writes a post talking about, I don't want to give details because I considered it undermining my safety. I felt like this post was could encourage someone to rob me, to break into my house and rob me because of the details that were put in. It didn't happen, but it could have. That's why I objected to that particular thing and the breaking of the NDA, which is just, if she had any money, I could sue her, but she doesn't have any damn money. So, NDAs aren't really worth much when the person has no money. You know, that happened, and then there are other things I don't even want to get into. But then I have seen men get similarly attacked. I mean, in all the Gamergate harasses women, Ben Kuchera is not a woman. You know? What's that dude's name at Gawker? He's not a woman. Jason Schreier? Not a woman. I think we could go through list after list. Chris Cluey, not a woman, right? Football player, you know, although there are some pretty kick-ass female football players. But there are plenty of men who have just been besieged. I mean, David Packman got it between the eyes a few times, and I mean, David's great. You know, we've talked off air when I've done his show. He's a cool dude. He's just doing his job. He's trying to make some money because he thinks he should be able to make money doing what he does ethically and fairly. And he has had such an open mind on this whole thing. But people from both sides went after him. When does this get factored into the conversation? When do we recognize that this issue of harassment connected to the Gamergate controversy is not a problem of harassing women? It's a broader problem of harassing people. When do we get this graphic, a man and a woman? When does, you know, the horrendous abuse of all people? And why do I say this? It's not for political reasons. I'm not saying this for political reasons. I am saying this because I desperately want things to improve. And we can't find the appropriate cure if we don't, how do I put this? If we don't diagnose the correct illness, that's the metaphor I was reaching for. If we see this as something related to a hatred of women, and it's not, well, then our solution, based on the assumption that it is based on the hatred of women, is going to have a very low impact. Why? Because that wasn't the problem. And so then, okay, so we beef up protections for women, but men continue to get, you know, harangued, completely harangued. I mean, you know, the Ralph retort has had his own share of woes, and some people could claim that he has it coming, but I disagree. I don't think anybody deserves the level of what he got. I know, I'm defending Ralph. See? I can be objective. People went after members of Ralph's family, and I'm not going to disclose those details if you don't know them because I don't want to spread that issue, but it made me feel for him that he was concerned for members of his family. And, you know, some people could say, well, then Ralph should stop running a tabloid. But isn't that the exact same issue that Brianna was talking about? That people are trying to silence him. They're trying to make him so miserable that he's run off the internet. Yeah, but in this case, they're right. You can't go that. You can't go there. You know, the reason I'm talking about Ralph right now is because I wouldn't do what he does. He's written garbage about me. He's corrected some of it's still up there. And I'm, you know, a little concerned right now that that stuff is going to be used to put me on, you know, websites about corrupt journalists or potential perception of impropriety of journalists based on that information. And I can't stop it if it does, but that's the thing. I'm not trying to stop Ralph from doing what he's doing. I'll just, you know, if something's completely inaccurate, I'll oppose that. But that's the slippery slope here. And those are the interesting tests, and, you know, people are probably going, oh my God, she's playing both sides again. Well, yeah, I'm not playing both sides. I'm using a comparative analysis to show when there's faulty logic, guys. Like, if we're saying that it's wrong to suppress the opinions of feminists because people disagree with them and want them to be silenced, well, we have to take that and then go, well, if we're ideologically opposed to tabloid websites, that means we don't have the right to attempt to silence tabloids if we disagree with the tactic. And this is where I get accused of playing both sides all the time. And that's absolutely not it. I'm looking at it and going, what is a fair solution that will work for everyone? Because I am stuck. I'm stuck in this war. I am a feminist. I'm also a gamer. You know, I love indie games. I also love AAA games. And so I'm sitting here going, every solution I have seen thus far basically advocates killing a piece of my very complex personal identity. And I'm not prepared to do that. I'm not prepared to say that one part of me is worth more than another part of me. I'm not prepared to have to choose between being a feminist and being a gamer. I'm not prepared to have to choose between being a woman and advocating for better games press. I refuse to feed in to those false A-B choices, those false dichotomies. I refuse to feed a false war. There are solutions that can include everyone. And I feel like those solutions are not getting enough promotion. They are not getting enough of an airing because we continue to follow these false leads that the bad conduct of people involved in Gamergate is connected to gender. And I have just not seen any evidence that gender is the motivation and not just a tactic, like I've talked off the top. And do I give a raging shit about, wow, what would a raging shit look like? That would be disruptive. That would be disgusting. I am shit. I am raging out of your bunghole. Wow, okay, tangent. Moving on. I really, really think that if we continue to promote this Gamergate is about harassing women thing, we will have gone through all of this and implement changes and implement solutions that will not solve the problem because it is not addressing the actual problem. It is ignoring certain variables. It is ignoring certain evidence. And misogyny is online is absolutely a real thing. I've said from the beginning, some people are just raging sexist and would like all women to, shut up and go make them a sandwich. But there's plenty of people in this who aren't that. And demonizing the people that aren't like that to try to shut up the people who are, that's unfairly taking away someone's freedoms. That's unjust, and I'm not okay with that. And that's, where I stand as a feminist, in that feminism aims for equality. Feminism does not aim for the supremacy of women. No. And I don't think that's what people are intending to do here, but we have to be very careful about creating false positives when it comes to, misogyny being a motivator. And like I said, I think it very much is a motivator for some people involved in this thing, just because it fits the patterns I'm seeing, but it's not all of it. And I think there's a way to work on this stuff without getting fixated on that point. The same way I think that there's a way to address ethical concerns without continuing to fixate on the Game Journal's pros mailing list, right? I think that both of these are reductive oversimplifications of the issue, and that's why I keep going, every time this comes back up, because it's not going to solve the problem. It's circling the bowl. It's not climbing out of the pit. And we need solutions. I want to be a part of those solutions. I want to make gaming better. I'm passionate about inclusivity for all gamers. Because a lot of, white, straight, cisgendered men have invisible losses of privilege, if we're going to use those terms, that matter as well, right? Poverty, mental illness, physical disability. These things all result in a loss of privilege with someone still being a straight cisgendered white male, right? So we have to keep that in mind too. It's a complicated problem, but I think there are solutions. But the first step is to step away from the easy false solutions. We got it? Good.